Tonight on Capitol Blue, the Senate floor just erupted. Adam Schiff stood up and delivered a fiery warning. America is already at war with Iran, and Congress never voted for it. According to Schiff, this isn't just about foreign policy, it's about the U.S. Constitution itself. He says the president launched military action without authorization, without debate, and without proof of an imminent threat. And now, Congress is being forced to decide whether to rein in the president's war powers or allow another open-ended conflict in the Middle East. Schiff is demanding a vote to block further military action against Iran. So what exactly happened? Why does Schiff say the administration's justification keeps changing? And could this vote reshape the balance of power between Congress and the White House?
Mr. President, we are at war once again. George W. Bush had his Iraq war, and Donald Trump now has his Iran war. Make no mistake, with the massive deployment of American military forces, with the massive amounts of ordnance that are being used, with the tragic loss of 6 lives, 6 service members of the United States, we are at war. We are at war having had no national debate over whether we should enter into war. We are at war having had no authorization by Congress, a power explicitly given by our founders to the Congress to declare war. The founders understood that the executive branch acting alone would grow too fond of war. We are seeing that fear materialize before our eyes with a president that now has used military force repeatedly against different countries for different rationales. Why should we care whether there is a vote in Congress on war? Why should we care whether there's a debate in the country over war? We should care because if we vest the sole power to make war in the President of the United States, the sole decision to bring a country into war with the President of the United States, there is no check on the use of that authority. There is no check on the abuse of that authority. There is no meaningful way to constrain a president from getting involved in adventurism around the world that causes our country an enormous price to pay in lives lost, in treasure lost. Now, you might say, well, what about these other uses of military force by others in the past? Well, of course, with the Iraq War, there was a vote on authorization. With the Afghanistan War, there was a vote on authorization. But what about these other uses? Doesn't the president have a right to use force to defend the country from imminent attack? And the answer is yes. If there's an imminent threat of attack, the president has the authority. But if it goes beyond anything imminent, he must come to Congress for an authorization. So what was the imminent threat here? Well, the short answer is there was none. But the administration has given several shifting rationales, several incompatible arguments with why they believe there was an imminent threat. Let's look at Secretary Rubio last week said that the Iranians were headed in the pathway to one day being able to develop weapons that could reach the continental United States. Well, a threat to reach the United States one day in the future is the very antithesis of imminent. Donald Trump said on Monday the regime had missiles capable of hitting Europe and our bases, both local and overseas, and would soon have had missiles capable of reaching our beautiful America. By soon, the best estimates are that would take years. That is certainly not imminent. Secretary Rubio on Monday had this to say: there absolutely was an imminent threat. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action, he said. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces, and we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer high casualties. We knew that if Iran was attacked even by someone else, they would immediately come after us, and we were not going to sit there and absorb a blow before we responded. So on Monday, Rubio says, because Israel was going to attack, we had to preemptively attack. But on Tuesday, the president contradicted his own Secretary of State and said, we were having negotiations with these lunatics, meaning the Iranians. It was my opinion that they, meaning Iran, were going to attack first. They were going to attack if we didn't do it. If anything, the president said, I might have forced Israel's hand. But Israel was ready. So the president says, no, the imminence didn't come from Iran. From Israel. He may have, in fact, forced Israel's hand. And on Tuesday, Hegseth took sides with the president, and not Marco Rubio, saying that Trump's explanation was 100% correct. Okay, so the imminent threat didn't come from anything that Israel was planning to do. It didn't come from missiles that could hit the United States that were years away. What was the other imminent rationale that the administration used? Well, on February 21st, Stephen Witkoff said Iran is, quote, probably a week away from having industrial-grade bomb-making material. Of course, that contradicts what the president said last June with the first Iran war, in which he said and reiterated just this past Saturday that, quote, "we obliterated the regime's nuclear program." Well, either we obliterated it or we didn't. And if we obliterated it, it's obviously not an imminent threat. On Monday, Secretary Hegseth told reporters at the Pentagon that the Islamic Republic was building sophisticated missiles and other conventional weapons to shield its plans for a nuclear bomb. Iran had a conventional gun to our head, he said, as they tried to lie their way to a nuclear bomb. Again, no evidence that Iran was on the cusp of a missile that could hit the United States, no evidence that Iran was building the mechanism of a bomb, no evidence of imminence. What about regime change? Is that somehow a rationale for war at all, let alone war without an authorization by the American people in Congress? Donald Trump in 2016 had this to say about regime change. He said, "We must abandon the failed policy of nation building and regime change." Even earlier in 2025, Donald Trump said, "Regime change takes chaos, and ideally we don't want to see so much chaos." But on Saturday, Donald Trump said, "When we are finished, take over your government," he said to the Iranian people. "It will be yours to take. Take back your country." On Monday, Secretary Rubio said, "We would love to see this regime being replaced." On Tuesday, Donald Trump said someone from within the Iranian regime might be the best choice to take over. But regime change is not an argument that we face an imminent threat. And finally, the last rationale of the administration is, on Saturday, the president posted on Truth Social that, quote, "Iran tried to interfere in 2024 elections to stop Trump and now faces renewed war with the United States." On Sunday, he said and cited Iran's effort to assassinate him as a key factor in ordering the operation that killed Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Quote, "I got him before he got me," Trump told ABC News. "I got him first." So this was, I guess, the final rationale. Is he wanted to get the Iranians before they got him? So here we are with this shifting series of incoherent rationales, none of them amounting to imminence, none of them posing a direct and imminent threat to the United States. And now we're at war again, where we have tragically lost the lives of American service members, where we are sinking billions and billions of dollars again into a foreign war, without time constraint, without plan. This comes at a great cost to American people, most particularly to our military families. But we are about to get a request for a supplemental appropriation, probably in the tens of billions of dollars, to backfill all the munitions we're using today. That's tens of billions of dollars that will not go into your health care. That's tens of billions of dollars that will not go to reducing the cost of your housing or your groceries. That's tens of billions of dollars that will not go into investing in America. That's tens of billions of dollars that we are literally blowing up over Iran when we face no imminent threat. Folks, we have already essentially walked away from our most important power, and that is the congressional power of the purse. The president rescinds funds, he impounds funds, and we put up no murmur of protest. We have walked away from that most important power in the Constitution that the founders gave us. The other most important power they gave us was the power to declare war. There is no argument that this is anything less than war. And this resolution is about stopping that war, but it is also about reasserting Congress's vital role as a check on the executive and the abuse of the authority to bring a nation to war. This is about whether the American people, through their elected representatives, will have a say when their sons and daughters are put in harm's way, when the resources of this country are diverted away from their communities and towards the building of bombs and weapons and engagement in another potentially endless foreign war. I thank Senator Kaine for this resolution. I'm proud to work with you on this, Senator, and I urge all my colleagues to support it, and I yield back.
What we just heard from Senator Adam Schiff on the Senate floor is more than a policy disagreement. It's a constitutional confrontation over who gets to decide when America goes to war. Schiff opened his remarks with a blunt declaration: the United States is already at war with Iran. And his argument is simple. When American forces are deployed in large numbers, when weapons are being launched, and when American service members have already lost their lives, that's not a limited operation. That's war. But according to Schiff, there's a problem. Congress never authorized it. Under the U.S. Constitution, the power to declare war belongs to Congress, not the president. The founders deliberately designed it that way because they feared that a single executive could too easily drag the nation into conflict. Schiff argued that this fear is playing out right now. He says the administration has repeatedly used military force around the world without meaningful oversight, and this latest conflict with Iran is the most dangerous example yet. So the key question he raised is this: was there an imminent threat? Because under U.S. law and tradition, presidents can use military force unilaterally only when there's an immediate threat to American lives or territory. But Schiff says the administration's explanation keeps shifting. At one point, officials argued Iran was developing missiles that could reach the United States. But even the administration's own estimates suggest that capability is years away. That's not imminent. Then another justification surfaced, that Israel was preparing to attack Iran, and the United States needed to strike first to avoid retaliation. But Schiff pointed out that even that explanation contradicts statements from the president himself, who suggested that the U.S. strike may actually have pushed Israel to act. In other words, according to Schiff, the rationale keeps moving. And when the justification keeps changing, it raises a bigger question. Was there really an imminent threat at all? Schiff also addressed another controversial possibility: regime change. Some administration officials have suggested they would welcome the Iranian government being replaced. But Schiff warned that regime change has historically been one of the most dangerous and destabilizing goals in U.S. foreign policy. He reminded lawmakers that even Donald Trump previously criticized regime change wars, calling them chaotic and disastrous. Yet now, Schiff argues, the rhetoric coming from the administration sounds strikingly similar to the policies Trump once condemned. But beyond the strategic debate, Schiff focused heavily on the costs of war. He warned that another prolonged conflict in the Middle East could drain tens of billions of dollars from the U.S. economy, money that could otherwise go toward healthcare, housing, or lowering the cost of living. Instead, he says, those funds could end up financing weapons, munitions, and an open-ended military campaign. And perhaps most importantly, Schiff emphasized the human cost. Every war carries the risk that more American service members will be put in harm's way. More military families will face loss. More lives could be changed forever. That's why Schiff says Congress must step in now. He's supporting a war powers resolution introduced by Senator Tim Kaine that would require the president to either seek congressional authorization or end military operations against Iran. In other words, Congress would reassert its constitutional authority over war. For Schiff, this vote is about more than Iran. It's about whether the legislative branch will reclaim its role as a check on presidential power. Because if Congress allows the executive branch to launch wars without authorization, Schiff warns, the constitutional balance designed by the founders could slowly disappear. Now the question is whether lawmakers from both parties are willing to draw that line. Because if they don't, Schiff says the United States could once again find itself locked in another potentially endless foreign war. And this time, without the American people ever being asked if they wanted it.